that's the area that I've worked on the most for sure. And the thing about singing in a metal band and playing guitar at the same time is you just have to do it. And you have to do it in front of a lot of people because your body will respond differently if you're doing it at home in front of nobody or in France in front of, 10, 15,000 people, whatever. I've been learning on the job since I started Spirit Adrift.
Ghost Cult Magazine welcomes in Nate of Spirit Adrift. It's great to see you again, my friend.
You too, brother. You were just saying off camera, you were at our show at St. Vitus, which was like show number 2 or 3, man. So you've been around.
Yeah, well, I've been a longtime fan. The band has obviously evolved and gone through changes. And I know you've talked a lot about that in the past. Personal changes, band changes, the music industry, the whole world has gone through, as I like to say, a crazy global psychotic break the last few years. So, music's the healer and the dealer. And, I feel like it's the equalizer of everything. If we have art and music, we can get through whatever horribleness the world throws at us. So I've always been a fan. Just appreciate what you do. This new record, Ghost, Ghost At The Gallows is just such a step up. And I know that you care about what you put out. I know it matters to you. There's a ton of bands playing killer riffs and making awesome songs, but what is left standing years from now? Are people going to come back to these records or spin them one time or play them on Spotify and forget about them? And I feel like you particularly have been very invested in making memorable music that has meaning and stays with people.
God damn, man. Thank you. I mean, I don't know what to say to that. I have a hard time. I almost have an easier time with haters than I do with somebody saying something like that. It's like hard to accept. But yeah, man, that's a good way of putting it, like a global psychotic break. And yeah, I had a couple like personal, every time I make a record, there will be a point somewhere in the process, usually right when it's finished, where I have all this like energy and I've my body and mind has had a certain amount of energy output that it expects every day that I'm working on this record. And usually it'll happen when I'm done, where I have like a borderline nervous breakdown. So I've come to expect that. But man, I had a few working on this one. It was like tough circumstances, even outside of the circumstances of making a record. And yeah, you said it all, man. Like music has always helped me deal with whatever's going on in my life. And even just as a fan, but as a creator of music, yeah, that's the ultimate goal to help myself get through life. And if I can connect with one other person and help them, then I'm satisfied,
Word. Well, I know I speak for a lot of people. Just as a fan, you've helped me a lot, so I appreciate you right off the bat.
Awesome.
And
Thank
this
you, man.
record is more of the same, more of the good juice, the num juice in my ears that I like. But it's really the business is unforgiving, but you've been, and I appreciate you sharing that stuff. Mental health is a thing we can't like sidestep. It's out in front now. I'm really, if anything, I know people are like ick feelings, but it's like we need to be open about these problems. And your career is also like your children. This is like your music, how an album comes out, every element of it, especially when you've been kind of doing it at this level for a long time. It matters, and that you can't let things go by the wayside. I just saw this awesome documentary, and Noel Gallagher of Oasis was talking about like the record everybody loves from them in the 90s. He hated the album cover, but he was so messed up at the time. He was just like, whatever. And then like a year later, when he had some clarity and some sobriety, he was like, oh my God, that is shit. Who approved that? They were like, you did. You approved it. And he's like, oh man.
Yeah.
So like, you don't want one of those things to happen. And, just irrespective of outside issues, but like, it matters. These things, the anxiety that it must bring, I can't imagine.
Yeah. Well, I can say that I've had far more bands where I was in Noel Gallagher's shoes, where I was super fucked up and not as invested in every aspect of it, really just invested in the music. And I could only invest so much, as fucked up as I was. But there's a reason I was in like 25 bands before I did Spirit Adrift that very few people have heard of any of them, So I've had my fair share of being fucked out of my mind trying to make art and music, and I prefer being present for it, you know.
Right on. That's amazing. And again, I appreciate that. And I'm sure there's a cult of Nate fandom out there that wants to hear those demos or find out about those projects. It's
I
probably a
wouldn't
Reddit
be so
thread.
sure, but
I think so. I think so. Let's talk also, we didn't get to talk around the time of the covers album, but I was wondering if that you've always been very, forward about your influences outside of even metal or outside of the metal you make and the music you make. That's not, strictly what you do. A lot of people are like, I like Sleep and High on Fire and I make doom metal. Okay, yeah. But yeah, of course. But I like that covers album was very diverse, and I wanted to ask if it had any impact when you went to do the writing for this album.
not really. No, it was two separate things. Those covers, I think, were recorded. My part in those covers, I was finished in like January of 2020. Actually, that's how long of a delay there can be with the behind the scenes stuff. And the new album was birthed from this writing session that began for me in March of 2020. Three of those songs ended up being Forge Your Future, the EP that we put out in 2021, which up until the new album is probably my favorite Spirit Adrift release. It's the one that bothers me the least, you know. And then the two originals that are part of that weird 6 cover 2 original release that you're referring to, those were written in the same session, which began in March 2020 and went on for, I mean, that writing session went on for 2 years, 2.5 years. I probably wrote between 20 and 30 songs, wrote and demoed between 20 and 30 songs. And after releasing that EP and then the 2 originals on 20 Centuries Gone, I just kept writing and whittling down until I had the 8 best songs that I was capable of making. I would say, that some of those covers, you got ZZ Top and Leonard Skinner, which is like Southern rock that I grew up with, like 2 of my very first favorite bands. And I think what really had a like immeasurable impact on the writing of the new album was moving back to the South, moving to Texas in 2020. I grew up in the South, in rural areas, small town type environments. And I'm back in a small town. I'm back in the South. I'm back out in the woods, away from people, amongst the fellow animals, and man, it's where I feel at home. And I think that really had an impact on the new record more than anything.
Nice. Nature is very good for you. It's good for
Mm-hmm.
people. I know we're all kind of urban animals now, but like nature is actually good for people. We have to realize that these states are not just big city centers, and
Yeah.
Texas is obviously vast. So that's cool, man. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
And then also, I know there's been kind of this transition to a full band and an actual collaborative band now. So obviously, look, it's always going to be you stirring the drink and steering the ship. But I wanted to ask about like the impact of now having kind of like a more, equitable situation with a full band.
Yeah, it's great, dude. Since day one of this being a full band, I've always tried to encourage and empower everybody that's been in the band to contribute as much as they want to, or contribute as much as they're willing to, or take on as much responsibility as they're willing to take on, or whatever. And I think that can be difficult because it did start as a solo project. It kind of, it's sort of at its core, I guess, is still kind of a solo project, though, as you described, like not so much anymore. When I moved to Texas, I was playing in a thrash metal crossover type band with Mike Fury, who is the drummer for Spirit Adrift now. And I just like couldn't stump the guy. At band practice, sometimes you'll kick into a riff and maybe you'll play like 10 seconds of the song and everybody's like barely figuring it out. But I would play like Country Girl by Black Sabbath from the Mob Rules album, and Mike knows the whole song. He had just finished playing in a Slayer tribute band. So like at most metal band practices, you'll play Raining Blood and you play 10 seconds of it and then everybody goes off the rails. I started playing it one day and the whole band played the whole fucking song. I just couldn't stump him, man. Harvester of Sorrow. Like we were literally just, we have the exact same musical vocabulary. Mike grew up, I think he went to his first concert at 4 years old. You know, his dad was super into classic rock and old school metal. His whole house was full of VHS of Van Halen and Metallica and Iron Maiden and Priest. And he grew up seeing those bands starting at age 4. So, I mean, he was just like the perfect guy for this band. And, you know, I write and demo the songs at home, and I will write and program like a drum part. I used to play the drums, but now it's a lot easier just to program it. And I told Marcus and I told Mike, like, do whatever you want. These drums are just here just so you can hear the song and understand the song. And Mike has really elevated the drumming to like a whole other thing. You know, we love all the same drummers: Lombardo, Vinnie Paul, Tommy Aldridge, like the old arena and stadium old school metal drummers, you know, and he brings that energy. And then Tom Draper, I've known him for a few years. I met him before COVID. He was in Carcass, and Spirit Adrift and Carcass played some shows together. I met Tom, really nice guy, such a sweet guy. In my opinion, one of the best metal guitarists on the planet right now. I was saying that before he was in my band, but I'll continue to say that because I still feel that way. And man, you know, we split the lead guitar duties on the new album, and he was sending me ideas for his solos, and I was like, fuck, I gotta do something. I gotta step it up. So he really pushed me to, you know, when we were working on Divided by Darkness back in the day, I was really pushing myself to get the shred back up, because I'm more of a feel-based player, you know, blues and old hard rock. But Tom pushed me to explore guys like Uli John Roth and Jakey Lee and stuff like that, and really get my chops back up. So yeah, I mean, they just and Sonny's been on bass since 2019. And we're locked in, man. I'm actually working on a live album right now. I'm mixing a live album as we speak. So I wanted people to hear the power of the band right now, because these guys are locked in, you know, they're really elevating the material.
That's amazing. I'm so stoked. And let's put some more flowers on Tommy Aldridge's name. I feel like that guy doesn't get enough respect after all these years.
I love him.
Everyone
man.
loves him, but it's like he's never the first few names out, right? But he is
he should be the first.
He really should. You're not wrong. The double kick master, honestly.
Yeah, man.
One more thing before we break off into a little track by track. I did want to I just always interested in you know, like I said earlier, I know you work hard on your craft. I love your vocals on this record. So it does feel like, you know, I know there's a lot of other things to unpack about the concept of the record, but there's like some phenomenal, like your best vocal performances. There's a couple of harmony parts that you put in that I had never heard before, like really cool, distinctive stuff, and some fantastic, just straight up, just great singing, which, like, you know, you don't always associate with this genre, but you're pulling it off, man. I appreciate it. It's great.
Thank you, man. That's the area that I've worked on the most, for sure. And the thing about singing in a metal band and playing guitar at the same time is you just have to do it. You have to do it, and you have to do it in front of a lot of people, because your body will respond differently if you're doing it at home in front of nobody, or in France in front of, you know, 10, 15,000 people, whatever. And you can only, I've been learning on the job since I started Spirit Adrift. You know, I never expected it to be like a full blown band that people listen to. So I've been figuring it out as I go along. And one thing we did differently with this album is we recorded vocals like 15 minutes from my house. So usually there would be budgetary constraints, time constraints, and it's like, okay, these 2 days you're recording vocals, and that's the window that you have, and that's that. Whereas this one, I got to go, you know, do 2 songs, let my voice rest over a weekend, go back, do another couple songs. I really got to take my time with it. And I didn't have to, in the past, I've always had to accept stuff that I knew I could have done better because of budgetary or time restrictions, right? But this time I didn't have those restrictions. So I feel like finally people are getting to hear what I'm fully capable of when I've like broken the chains that can restrict recordings. sometimes. And as for like the big choir sounding harmonies and stuff, I've been doing that since pretty early on, but I'll build like a whole choir and it's just my voice and I'm doing like falsettos and really high stuff. But I always kind of buried it a little bit because it's like, I don't know, that it's like a vulnerable thing that, we can be very self-conscious about our own voice. But I don't know, like with the first song on the album, Give Her to the River, I built those big like choral type movements in the chorus of that song, and we were just so psyched on them that we just turned them up louder. So there they are.
Awesome, awesome. I appreciate you sharing all that. And I think people don't remember that like you hear yourself internally different than you actually sound when you hear it back played to you on a recording. It's wild. There's definitely a cognitive dissonance in your what you think you
100%.
sound like. Having done a bit of singing in the past, not that great. Okay, pretty decent. Let's get into the track by track. And again, Ghost of the Gallows. It's such a thing to try to get my hands around. But anything you want to share, we would really appreciate. Obviously, the Give Her to the River is the opening track.
Yeah, so I had that song title. I write music and lyrics that are directly related to whatever I'm going through in my life. And early 2020, like January 2nd, right before we went to record Enlightened, my wife and I had to put our dog down. And dude, we've lost human family members and best friends and all kinds of stuff. And that was like, it's different. It's really difficult. And we had her cremated. We ended up moving to Texas and we got 2 new dogs, and we would take the new dogs down. There's a river right down by where we live, 10-15 minutes away. And we would all get in the river and play around and swim around with the dogs. And January 2021, our dog had been gone for a year. I was like, why don't we spread her ashes in that river? So we did. And I wrote a song about it, man. And it's like, I try to write out these personal experiences in broad language that resonates with anybody that's got humanity in them. Might not resonate with like a sociopath, but anybody that's dealing with like being a human, and having emotions and stuff. I try to write in a broad sense. So that was a really personal experience, but I wrote a song sort of more about just the cycle of life, like putting the physical remnants of this thing that we loved so much into this stream where we were now living our lives with these new creatures that we love so much. And then one day we'll unfortunately have to do the same thing with them, and it's like, how do we get through something like that? You just keep going.
Mm-mm. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate that. That's rough.
Yeah, man.
The second track is the incredible single and video Barn Burner. I was doing this the whole time when I saw the video for the first time. The whole time.
Hell yeah. It worked then. Yeah, that was a fun one, dude. I was on a call. I shared this on my podcast. I was on a call with Century Media and our A&R guy, Mike Gitter, who I love. He made some comment like, I'm not really hearing a Ride Into the Light or this or that. I got fucking pissed. And I was just talking to him 5 minutes ago about it too, because he just listened to that episode and he was like, was it intentional? Was it all part of my strategy? Because I picked up a guitar and wrote Barn Burner like from start to finish. Literally, like I wrote the intro. All right, that's pretty cool. And I wrote the verse, wrote another riff, wrote the chorus. Bam, song was done. Wrote the thrash breakdown. I think that to me personally, I feel like that's maybe one of the more original, like not anything else out there quite like it, songs in the Spirit Adrift catalog. It just said there's so many different things going on, like the Mid-South 2000 stuff that I loved and grew up with, Mastodon and Baroness and Wake and stuff like that. But then there's like the early thrash stuff, Megadeth, Slayer, Testament. That's some of my favorite stuff. The Sabbath is in there, and the Southern rock thing is in there. I'm proud of that one, man. And yeah, lyrically, it's just kind of about the division that hasn't gotten any better since I wrote Divided by Darkness, all about, tribalism and fucking identity politics and hating other people for no reason or the wrong reasons, so it's just about, it's like can we stop like trying to crucify each other for various reasons all day long and just like focus on ourselves and making ourselves better and loving each other and, you know, hippie shit.
Sometimes you need that hippie shit, dude. Hanged Man's Revenge is track 3.
Yeah. So I just wanted to do like a break your face in half metal song with that one, you know. It took me a while to figure out, like, I had the title and the overall like idea, but I didn't really know exactly how it applied to my own life. And then I realized, you know, that's the anger song. Like there's the stages of grief are present in the album. That's the anger one. Me and all my friends got told that we were not essential. You know, I feel like we were talking about how important music is earlier in art. And I feel like that's pretty fucking essential, man. I would argue it's more of an essential job than president of the United States or speaker of the House or any of those motherfuckers. You know, what are they fucking doing for anybody? So that was the vibe with that one, is like I got told for 2 years that I was not an essential human being. And I watched a lot of my friends fucking die, you know, and yeah, I'm still fucking pissed. I'm probably going to be pissed off for the rest of my life about that. So that song is a big fuck you to anybody that thinks that music and art are not essential to the thriving of humanity, you know?
Beautifully said. I cannot add anything to that. No notes, my friend. No notes. These Two Hands, which is just beautiful, is the 4th track. It's a beautiful song.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I almost like never let that one see the light of day. That's about the dog as well. I wrote it about the dog, but then so many of my fucking friends were dropping dead that it ended up sort of being about all of them, just losing somebody in general. And yeah, I demoed that one. That's the first song I wrote when the COVID lockdowns hit. That's the very first one. I wrote it before everything on Forge Your Future. Literally the first song I wrote. Shit was raw still. And I demoed it. And I remember hearing like James Hetfield talking about Nothing Else Matters. He did not want anybody to hear that song. And his bandmates heard it and were like, dude, this has to come out. This has to be a Metallica song. And he was like very hesitant about that. And I understand now how he felt, because I wrote that song for me. I didn't feel comfortable letting other people hear it, but you know, everybody that did hear it was like, this is the best song out of all of them. Like the guy that runs Century Media, my friend Philip, he was like, this is the best song on the album. And I don't know, it's weird because it's very vulnerable and it's very real. And artists, we all have like, we vacillate between like egomania and inferiority, like imposter syndrome. So when he's telling me like, I know that's the realest song I've ever written, when he's telling me that's the best song on the album, like, are all these people fucking with me? Like, I don't know. It's like hard to accept. But yeah, that's the most personal song that I've ever put out to the public. And listening back to the album, that one definitely stands out to me as like one of the more epic, like when the heavy guitars kick in, I think that's one of the more epic moments in our catalog. So I'm glad that I didn't pussy out and I recorded that song and put it out.
Me too. I'm glad you got through it. I appreciate that it's
Thanks,
on here.
man.
And then flipping that around, Death Won't Stop Me is the 5th track. It's kind of like a middle finger.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of shit right now that's trendy. And a lot of it's like the second or third time that I've seen it come around. And I hated it the first time, and I've hated it every fucking time, and I hate it even more now. And that song is sort of about you know, most of my songs there's like an infinite amount of meanings. I know what I'm writing it about at the time. There might even be 3 or 4 meanings to me personally. It was kind of like man, you're going to get through this, even though a lot of people are dying and you're losing a lot of friends and loved ones. Like, just keep going. So there's that deeply personal element to it. But then there's also the element of like, I'm going to keep writing fucking straightforward, like real, what I consider real metal music, no matter what else is going on, whatever bullshit, embarrassing shit that's going on at the time. Like, Iron Maiden never has to be embarrassed of what they've done throughout their career. Judas Priest, bands like that. They stayed pretty damn true to what they were doing. A lot of this stuff that's hot right now in 10, 15 years, people are going to be so embarrassed that they're going to act like they were never into it in the first place, you know?
Very true. I think that's facts. Let's go with that. I Shall Return, another banger is the next one.
Thanks, man. Yeah, a lot of people point out the similarities to Crazy Train, but it's funny to me. I was going for like Tom Petty Refugee. That I watched it's funny, we toured with Midnight and they have a song called No Mercy for Mayhem. And I was listening to that song. I talked to Athanar after their set one night. I was like, dude, that's kind of like Refugee. That's like the chord. He's like, totally. I'm like, well, we have this new song. Everybody's saying it's like Crazy Train, but I was like more kind of thinking Refugee. And he goes, did you see the Damn the Torpedoes documentary, that Tom Petty album? Mike Campbell is talking about the second fret on the guitar and the power of that fret. And I was like, shit, dude. So yeah, me and Athanar saw the same documentary, and it inspired him to write No Mercy for Mayhem and inspired me to write I Shall Return. And they're two very different sounding songs, but they share some influences, which I think that just shows you how cool this is, that you know, we take our influences and filter them through our life experience and our emotions, and out pops something new. And I love the production on that song a lot. It's a tribute. It's a tribute to like the FM classic rock stations that I grew up listening to in the South, man, that would play Boston, Ozzy, every once in a while I played Metallica, Tom Petty, Blue Oyster Cult, stuff like that. I wanted to write a song that I feel like would fit in with songs of that caliber. And the production was like hugely important to that song. I like that one, man. But if you're gonna say I ripped something off, I ripped off Refugee, not Crazy Train.
You know what's funny? Just randomly, what I hear a lot in this record, especially not so much in the shred parts, but the riffs, I hear like a very classic early heavy metal. So I hear like not just New Album, but like the early Queensryche records with the split guitars and the different, you know, riffs in different octaves and things like that, and just very clever, cool songwriting. So
Cool,
I hear
man.
that. That's what I hear. But like,
Thank
I
you.
totally do also get like that, you know, flying that, you know, you've been like beating that drum for heavy metal and thrash, and then
Yeah.
and there's still like an occasional doom part, which I like too.
Yeah, the doom is still in me, man. And
Yeah, it's still there.
something, just as an aside, something that I notice that I love with this project is everybody that I talk to, they'll pinpoint different stuff that they hear, and it's usually stuff that was important to them getting into heavy metal, not so much even like what's important to me. And so there's something being transmitted there, and that's the shit, man, because your favorite music is the stuff you hear when you're going through adolescence and stuff, and that's what's being reflected back to me a lot. Like, you know, I hear Queensryche from you, I hear Merciful Fate from people that grew up with that, or whatever. A lot of people say COC, you know, it seems to be the stuff that they grew up with, which is really cool.
That is rad. I'm also a major COC person. So the next to last track is Siren of the South.
Yeah, so I wanted to write a song that was like fun for me, like an obstacle course almost. You know, there's like, when you look at the sequencing of an album, if you have super weird songs, you usually bury them. It's second to last song, third to last song, whatever. And I had all these big, catchy, straightforward songs, and I was like, man, let me do something a little more progressive just to keep myself entertained. So I noticed every time I was picking up a guitar, that's the song that I would start playing. Is like the most fun for me to play, just because it's got a lot of left field stuff, and it's kind of just strange and progressive and all over the place. And the lyrics are basically a love-hate letter to the American South. It's like a love-hate relationship growing up in the South. There's a lot of misery, and there's a lot of like downtrodden, swampy, haunted type of stuff, but there's a lot of joy and beauty and hospitality, and it's a special place, and I felt like I needed to write a song about it.
Word. I like that. And then the final track is the title track, sometimes left for the end. And if you want to talk about how this track, I feel like it kind of does encompass the whole album also. Beside being a really, killer ending to the album, it also seems to sum up everything.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's the second song I wrote after These Two Hands. And I spent a lot of time on that one. It evolved and evolved over the course of a couple years. And I wanted to write something that was a little slower or at least mid tempo with a lot of dynamics. Sort of more reminiscent of our earlier stuff. It has a whole section of just clean guitar and spaced out, trippy, Neurosis, Pink Floyd inspired type stuff. Getting back to some of the more metaphysical, coded lyrics, especially in that clean break, it's a little more obscure lyrics, like a little less literal. Nothing I write is totally literal, but I mean, in the early days, I was like really going off on some weird metaphorical type stuff. And so I tried to bring back a little bit of that earlier mystical spirit of the band, no pun intended. And yeah, once again, like people are all over the map. My brother-in-law was like, "Oh, it sounds like Sad but True." He's not a metalhead, so the most underground metal band he knows is Metallica, right? Crowbar was a big influence, obviously. Neurosis. Yeah, just want to write something slower and heavier and scary. Like the whole album's haunted, so obviously the title track needs to be like super spooky and haunted.
Killer. Thanks for sharing all that, especially the not so fun and painful parts. It's funny how many people I've interviewed this year have brought up Crowbar, actually. Not that it's funny because Crowbar is immense and great, but it is interesting to me how many people have mentioned Kirk and the influence of that band. I don't know if you have checked out that new group he has with the Typo guys, because I know you're
100%.
I know you're a Typo fan also. So I Am is that new band. They're in the studio right now making like an EP or an album. I'm so pumped.
Yeah, I was just talking to Kirk, man. We played Hellfest in France together last week, and that's the first thing we started talking about is how much fun he's having in that band. And because I texted him, we're pretty good buddies now, which is very surreal because that guy to me is like my generation's Lemmy. That's what Jamie Josta said that about him, and I agree totally. His output is just like intimidating. He's never sucked ever. He's never put out anything that sucked. But I was telling him, like, dude, when it came out, I texted him like, this is not at all what I was expecting. And we talked about that in person at Hellfest. He was just like, man, we're all old, we're just trying to have a good time. And people know what Crowbar sounds like. People know what Typo sounds like. And they had a certain expectations. We were like, who gives a fuck? Like, and they just were writing music that was making them happy. And that's beautiful, man. That's what I try to do too. But dude, I fucking love Kirk. I can't say enough nice things about that dude. Legend, man, legend. I love Crowbar. I love everything he's ever done. His solo record is amazing. Super nice guy. Yeah, American
Kingdom of
hero.
Sorrow. Let's shout out Kingdom of Sorrow since you brought up Jamie.
Oh yeah,
I
right.
remember seeing
Great
them at
band.
Mayhem Fest, like
Uh-huh.
before Cannibal Corpse and Behemoth and things. So killer
Cool.
stuff, man. Thanks for sharing. Also, whenever you say something like Kirk said this, and then I hear it in his voice, so you hear that, he's such a sweetheart, but he has that voice of like a
Oh yeah.
monster. So
Yeah.
he's wonderful. Shout out to Kirk and Robin and the whole Crowbar crew. Nate, man, it's just always a gift to chat with you. And thank you so much for sharing all that stuff. Not the easiest thing to do to talk about your art, but I appreciate you sharing this time with Ghost Cult, man. It's great to see you. I hope to see you on tour, and best of luck with the record coming out August 18th on Century Media Records.
Thank you so much, man. This was a great conversation. Because of you made it very easy. So thanks.